Hello everyone and good evening. I'm Don Arleth and coming to you live from Warsaw. You're watching World News Tonight. Donald Trump still won't rule out military force to take control of Greenland. However, the U.S. president said he didn't think it would come to that, adding that, quote, "we'll get Greenland 100%. So what could the consequences be if the U.S. coerces Greenland and its people to join the United States? We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first, the latest headlines. 3 years after Bucha, will those responsible for war crimes face justice? European officials say that Russia is responsible for sabotage attacks across Europe. And Turkey's protests extend all the way to Warsaw. We start off tonight with Greenland and U.S. President Donald Trump refusing to take military force off the table to acquire the territory. This is what he said in an interview for NBC News. The people of Greenland thus far have expressed no desire to join the United States, and the people there say Greenland is not for sale. Sonia Agata-Biszczan has more in her report.
According to a Saturday interview with American news agency NBC, nothing is off the table for the United States president in pursuit of Greenland, a semi-autonomous Danish territory.
No, I never take military force off the table, but I think there's a good possibility that we could do it without military force.
President Donald Trump said the U.S. will 100% acquire Greenland for the purpose of international security.
And we're not talking about peace for the United States, we're talking about world peace.
The idea of armed forces in the Arctic island does not sit well with the local population.
I think many people are considering where should we go if we're invaded. Should we go to Denmark? Should we go to Norway, Faroe Islands, Iceland? Do we lose our language? Do we lose our culture? It's a very serious threat.
More than that, residents of Denmark have also taken to the streets of Copenhagen in defiance of American interests in Greenland. Gathered in front of the U.S. Embassy on Saturday, the protesters criticized U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance's Friday visit to the Arctic island.
Our message to Denmark is very simple. You have not done a good job by the people of Greenland. This is why President Trump's policy in Greenland is what it is.
We can of course, talk about the amount of pressure that the U.S. has been exerting on Denmark, which I think is not acceptable. But what is valid is the strategic concern that the Trump administration has. In the very near future, the U.S. could actually find both Russia and China on its doorstep in Greenland.
The U.S. already has a military base in Greenland's Pitifik, visited by Vance, but with evolving navigation routes due to climate change and melting ice, the Arctic is becoming an increasingly strategic target for foreign powers.
So today, if there was only one U.S. military base, we understand it could be a problem, but that is something that can be discussed. The Danes aren't opposed to discussing it, nor are the Greenlanders. So there's no need to talk about annexation.
On the day of Vance's visit, Greenland formed a broad coalition government. The new prime minister said that the U.S. visit, taking place amid efforts to establish the government, demonstrated a lack of respect. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Agata-Biszczan.
President Trump said he is very angry and pissed off at the Russian leader for questioning the legitimacy of the Ukrainian president. Now Trump is threatening Russia with secondary tariffs if he determines that Vladimir Putin is stalling on a ceasefire. Meanwhile, deadly attacks on Ukraine continue, and Ukrainians mark the third anniversary since the liberation of Bucha, a scene of mass killings, rapes, and other war crimes committed by Russian forces before fleeing the city in 2022. Alex Sumlinsky reports.
Firefighters are working tirelessly as emergency services comb through the wreckage of destroyed homes. This is the aftermath of the latest Russian attacks on Ukraine's city of Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. Russian drones struck a military hospital, shopping center, apartment blocks, and other targets. President Zelensky stated that Ukraine expects a response from the United States, Europe, and all its allies to the terror directed at Ukrainians.
Russia is dragging out the war, and we are providing our partners with full information on the strikes the Russian army is carrying out and the actions it is preparing for.
Sunday saw the residents of the city Bucha pay their respects and remember the victims of the massacre committed there by Russian forces. It took place during the fight for and subsequent occupation of the city during the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022.
I remember that day. I was in territorial defense at that time, and my unit was one of the first to enter Bucha, Irpin, and Hostomel. And what we saw was a horror, absolutely. And that shows the real face of Russians.
According to Kyiv, more than 1,400 people were killed in Bucha during the occupation, including 37 children. More than 175 people were found in mass graves and torture chambers, and 9,000 Russian war crimes have been identified. 1 year later, following an investigation of war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide, the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin. Now, the European Union and the Council of Europe are setting up a new international court to prosecute Russian leaders for their involvement and planning of the Ukrainian invasion.
We should not only prosecute those who committed these awful crimes, but those who committed the most awful crime, to start the war in the middle of the Europe in 21st century.
The new court is called the Special Tribunal for the Crime of Aggression against Ukraine and is to be ready by the end of 2025. In a statement issued to present the new court, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said, "When Russia chose to roll its tanks over Ukraine's borders, breaking the UN Charter, it committed one of the gravest violations, the crime of aggression. Now, justice is coming." Alex Simlinsky, TVP World.
And staying on the topic of Ukraine, Finnish President Alexander Stubb announced in a press conference that he had informed Donald Trump about the need to set a deadline for reaching a ceasefire during the unscheduled visit to the United States. He said on that deadline would be April 20th. It would be a good time for a ceasefire without conditions. Now, some call it hybrid warfare, some asymmetric attacks, and others terrorism. No matter how you classify it, European officials say that Russia is responsible for a wave of attacks on European countries. From incendiary devices placed in parcels designed to take down planes, to the attempted murder of the CEO of Germany's largest arms manufacturer, and even the sabotage of underwater communications cables. Now, with more details, is John Todd.
Thick black smoke billows into the sky above the Polish capital Warsaw. This is just one of the incidents investigated by the Associated Press, allegedly carried out by the Kremlin in its so-called hybrid war against the West.
Russia has used fake news, disinformation, tried to export corruption, influence politicians. We've seen Russian influence during electoral processes in different countries.
It also includes sabotage in the Baltic Sea.
Putin has never really put up with the fact that the Baltic countries are no longer part of Russia, and I'm convinced that he wishes to change that in whatever way possible.
The EU and other Western leaders say the Kremlin's campaign of disruption is an extension of President Vladimir Putin's war against Ukraine.
The reports, as mentioned, are actually part of a long-standing strategy that the Putin regime has been employing, and that is to systematically weaken and divide Europe by all means necessary.
Examples highlighted by the Associated Press include an assassination plot against a German arms manufacturer and a plan to plant explosives on cargo planes. Last November, the head of the UK's Foreign Intelligence Service called Russia's hybrid war a staggeringly reckless campaign.
I think that's why Russia has been so skilled and used this kind of attacks on such a broad scale, namely because it's so hard for democracies to deal with this kind of challenges.
In Poland, the attacks also include the weaponization of migration on the EU's eastern border. Experts told the news agency the hybrid war is particularly worrying at a time when US support for Ukraine is wavering. And European allies are questioning Washington's reliability as a security partner and ally.
Now we head to sea, just off the Spanish coast in the Atlantic Ocean. NATO has officially launched the Dynamic Mariner 25 naval exercises. Although the United States is not taking a leading role, there's a lot to consider for Spain, which spends the least on defense among NATO members. The upcoming NATO summit in the summer might see the 2% minimum spending requirement drastically increased. Piotr Miszczuk reports.
This is what the Dynamic Mariner 25 drill looks like. A joint naval exercise held by the combined forces of several NATO member states, including Spain, France, Germany, Italy, Portugal and Turkey. Though the US forces were absent from the exercise, French Vice Admiral Didier Molitor, who serves as the vice head of NATO's Allied Maritime Command, or for short MARCOM, is certain the US is still a vital part of the bloc's naval architecture.
We are 32 members, and you can trust me, US Navy is supporting us, is contributing with their frigates, with a nuclear submarine, with a maritime patrol aircraft. They are participating in the Dynamic Mariner with the Spanish Navy and Turkish Navy.
The military official admitted that while nothing has changed so far in terms of the US involvement, NATO will soon hold vital security talks.
There is a new summit in La Haye in June, so there will be discussion about the capacity shared within NATO. And so there is a lot of discussion if 2% of GDP is enough. We know that through the regional plan, we need more. We need more to be able to deal with all those threats.
But NATO doesn't seem to be at sea with its capabilities.
We are very powerful. NATO at the moment is the largest military organization in the world. And the object during this exercise, particularly, it's interoperability, because we are 27 navies among the 32 nations. That's powerful way. We need to work together, and this exercise is a great demonstration of our power.
And according to NATO officials, the bloc will aim to learn lessons from what has been going on in Ukraine, the Red Sea and the Pacific from a maritime point of view.
Support for the jailed mayor of Istanbul can be seen all the way here in Poland. On Saturday, crowds of people assembled in Warsaw to show their solidarity with Ekrem İmamoğlu and the people of Turkey, who have taken to the streets throughout their country in support of the potential challenger to President Tayyip Recep Erdogan in the 2028 elections. Aisha Abachi was there and has this next report.
We are in the middle of Warsaw at the Solidarity March organized by the CHP, Republican People's Party of Turkey, here in Poland. This is a march organized to be in solidarity with the young people in Turkey.
A lot of friends using black masks here because they don't want to be known.
We love our country, so we can be there, but our hearts is there, so we want to support the country by protesting in Warsaw, Poland, so we want something to be changed.
Behind me, I can hear Turkish people here in Warsaw chanting Erdogan without a diploma. They are making an allusion to the mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu, who was arrested on the 19th of March for alleged corruption and terrorism, aiding terrorism group PKK. And just one day before he was arrested, he was stripped of his university diploma, which would make him constitutionally incapable of being the president of Turkey. And many believe that he was actually arrested because he's the most strong figure that could stand up to Erdogan and has a chance of winning the next presidential elections, which will be in 2028.
I hope for a change, definitely, but waiting something particular is a bit hard for our country.
I hope that these protests across the world will influence changes in Turkey.
At Saturday's Republican People's Party rally in Istanbul, hundreds of thousands demanded İmamoğlu's release, while university students urged authorities to free their jailed peers. The march concluded at Warsaw's Tomb of the Unknown Soldier.
We specifically chose this location because the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is one of Poland's symbols. In our own history and here with us, we also have many unknown soldiers. They will always stand against injustice, corruption, and lawlessness.
Ekrem İmamoğlu's arrest on contested charges has ignited a wave of mass protests that have not been seen in Turkey for the last decade. But the government has also responded with a heavy crackdown. Nearly 2,000 people, including journalists, have been detained. And as the situation unfolds, the question remains, how will this crisis shape Turkey's political future? Reporting for TVP World from Warsaw, I'm Aisha Bacha.
Katarzyna Bonda is the queen of the Polish whodunit. The numbers don't lie. 3 million copies sold in just Poland alone. Our own Karolina Szaplan met the famous writer at her home and managed to uncover some secrets.
At first glance, you might mistake Katarzyna Bonda for a social media star. She's so famous in Poland that even her latest hair color sparks tabloid buzz. But Bonda is far more than just a style icon. She's the undisputed queen of Polish crime fiction, with over 40 novels and 4 TV series under her belt.
My crime novels are written to entertain. The reader should have a great time. I invite them into a cave, a den of evil. I lead them through that tunnel, and then I bring them out into the light, because in every one of my books, there's a happy ending. The culprit is always revealed.
Her novels may be filled with darkness and suspense, but off the page, she's a different person.
She's an incredibly interesting, wise and intelligent person, but also very warm. What she writes and how she writes is nothing like who she is in real life.
After 2 decades of hard work, she's made her literary dreams a reality. And her advice to aspiring crime writers?
Don't be afraid, just do it. Now, as a woman nearing 50, I know with absolute certainty that if you start doing something, you'll figure out along the way whether it's truly for you or not.
Katarzyna Bonda wasn't an overnight success. Now, a leading name in Polish crime fiction, she's paying it forward, helping the next generation of crime writers sharpen their craft.
Success didn't happen overnight. It was neither instant nor grand. Those early years were crucial for me because more experienced people in the industry offered their support. Now I'm giving back, and I intend to keep doing so.
The Polish queen of crime, who has it all.
And now we return to the topic of Greenland, with Donald Trump saying that he's 100% sure the U.S. will get the territory. Also raising eyebrows is the American president's refusal to take military force off the table. Trump says Greenland is needed for global security. Meanwhile, the locals there have not expressed any desire to join the United States and say that the island is not for sale. Now, joining me to discuss these conflicting opinions is former Slovakian Defense Minister Martin Sklenar. Hello, and thank you very much for joining us on World News Tonight.
Good evening.
Now, we just saw U.S. Vice President Vance visit Greenland at the U.S. Space Force base there in the north of the country. He only spent about 3 hours on the ground. What message do you think that he was trying to project in this visit? And would you say it was successful, or perhaps maybe it was a failure?
Frankly, it's very difficult to decipher the message that if there was one message that J.D. Vance wanted to deliver in Greenland, it's more likely that there were several messages, and some of them are even conflicting ones. If you hear him saying and talking about that he believes that there will be no need to use military force for the U.S. To find an arrangement about the use of Greenland, but then on the other hand, he also mentions that Denmark has not done a great job in caring for security of the U.S. detachment that is on the island. That sends a very mixed message both to Greenlanders, but also to Denmark as a NATO allies. So it's not clear to me what J.D. Vance's primary objective was. It's certain that he wanted to say something less controversial than President Trump and maybe soften the whole rhetoric as it develops from the White House. I'm not sure that he, excuse me, I'm not sure that he actually succeeded in that mission, just because the mixed nature of the messages.
We see somewhat of a paradox here. The Trump administration has said that it wants to partner with Russia to counter China. It constantly has been parroting Russian talking points and disinformation in negotiations. Yet it says that Russia actually poses a threat to the United States in the Arctic. So what are we to understand from these mixed signals coming from the White House? Could this perhaps be some negotiating tactic that he's using with Russia in the Ukrainian sphere and the peace negotiations?
It's certainly something that is not usual. We don't recognize this as something that would be for us traditional U.S. policy. It's certain that in the U.S.-China relationship, in that Russia plays a somewhat interesting role also for the United States, and President Trump obviously wants to make sure that the Chinese counterparts also understand that he would be willing to use some kind of an arrangement or even cooperation with Russia if it's expedient and beneficial for the U.S. In the relationship with China. He wants to remain in an unpredictable situation when it comes to China's calculation, what could be actually happening. That's the part about why he's so contradictory on the Russia line. When it comes to the Arctic, there Russia presents a clear threat, and there's no way around it. And the U.S. has to recognize it, and the president has to recognize it. So there he needs to talk and walk a much tougher line on Russia, just because the security situation in the Arctic is so close for the two superpowers, and plays a crucial role also with the changing geographics of the Arctic, given the climate change that progresses and opens more and more geography to play with up in the Arctic.
From one side, we hear that the United States needs Greenland for global security and global peace. But really, what's stopping the United States from expanding its military presence in Greenland? It can do so at any time due to the military or the defense pact that he has with Greenland. So what's preventing them from, why does it necessarily have to become an American territory?
It's not clear, and quite frankly, it's not clear whether that's the final objective that the U.S. is going for, to take Greenland into its own territory. I mean, the rhetoric obviously is very strong, but as we see also in the case of the negotiations about Ukraine, we see that President Trump and his administration use this strong rhetoric to bring counterparts to the table. And try to negotiate something that is then perceived as the true objective of the U.S. So there is probably going to be more revealed also in the planning and in the interest of the U.S. in the Arctic. But as you rightly point out, I mean, based on the agreement with Denmark, U.S. has access, even military access, to the island. And it's a matter of negotiations among allies and between allies to make sure that the interest that the U.S. has in Greenland, be it military, be it also economic, is taken care of, and that the two countries find a way to make sure that, based on the agreement that they have concluded in the past, they can both have the best possible way of using Greenland and its geography.
Now, Vladimir Putin has discussed the issue in public. He says that the issue is between two countries that do not involve Russia, essentially giving his blessing to the U.S. annexation. How dangerous is this approach to the international order, which has been established, ever since the end of World War II? Something that we've lived by for all these years, that you do not go around the world and take sovereign territory by force.
it's not only dangerous, but it's also something that, quite frankly, Vladimir Putin would like to see and would be very happy to see, that two NATO allies are disputing over territory in the Arctic, and he would fuel that dispute and put as much gas into the fire as possible to make sure that NATO is seen as an alliance that doesn't guarantee the strength and the unity that makes the most strength of NATO. And this is something that, as I say, Vladimir Putin would be very happy about that. So in that sense, he's never going to say anything else, but leave it to the countries and hope for the best possible show, so to say. I wouldn't expect anything else from him.
What do you think are some possible scenarios that the U.S. takes control of Greenland? The Prime Minister Denmark, Nielsen, responded to the U.S. President Trump's threats against his country, saying that President Trump says the United States will get Greenland. Let me be clear, the United States cannot do this. Is there any other way that Denmark and the United States somehow come together and have some kind of hybrid agreement? I don't know.
Certainly, that would require, excuse me, the two countries coming together and discussing the interests, the possibilities, and how to deliver on the interests. It's normal. That would be the rational scenario to go have a rational discussion based on defined positions and agree how do we go forward, what are the interests. This is the security interest, this is the economic interest, this is the supply chain interest, and all that can be taken into account, and a way of a mutual use of the island can be found. Obviously, the U.S., as it looks like, and also after the Vance visit, it looks like they are not really interested in having this kind of approach. So I would expect to see they will be looking for ways to increase their military presence in the space base that they have at the island already, and incrementally increasing their presence just to showcase the importance of the island, and then trying to put as much pressure on Denmark as possible. I think Denmark with its Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen is handling this situation quite remarkably, calm and rational, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of that.
Is it possible to have a rational negotiation with President Trump, number one? And number two, what happens if the U.S. annexes Denmark by force? What does that do to NATO, for instance?
That would be a very difficult situation for NATO, certainly. Something that would have implications not only for NATO, but beyond in the world. And also we would see probably larger movements of the geopolitical situation, especially and foremost in Ukraine and possibly in the Baltics. But let's take that as a very hypothetical case, and something that is really out there somewhere, only if everything else fails. I truly believe that behind the rhetoric that we hear coming from the White House, and that is sometimes met also with other rather strong rhetoric from U.S. partners, there is a baseline on which negotiations are being held. We see a similar situation now also back in the Ukraine negotiations, where the true diplomacy or international connections that are doing their work is a much more regular way of dealing with these critical situations. And I truly believe even behind this all hyped up rhetoric coming from the White House or even from the Vice President himself, just recently, there is a rational discussion to be had also with the Trump administration.
Indeed, let's hope so. Martin Sklenar, former Slovakian defense minister, thank you very much for the conversation. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.